Today we're going to be using Cursor, the AI code editor, to build a full stack application. And I have the perfect idea of what to build because the other day, Theo of T3 announced the T3 chat Cloneathon. So he's essentially challenging everybody to create a clone of his app, T3 chat. The core of this app is essentially that you can chat with it like ChatGPT, but you can choose from a variety of different providers and models. This way, you're only paying $8 a month instead of paying separately for each of these providers. So it's a pretty smart idea, but the app at its core is really pretty simple. You get to choose the model. It does have some search. It does have attachments. It has login. It's obviously storing all of these chats. Really, it's a very good example of a basic full stack application, but you are going to need to have some kind of UI design system, a server, a database. You're going to have authentication, and all of these things take time. Thankfully, I'm going to be able to fast forward through a lot of that, and I'm going to show you exactly how you can do the same. So we're going to open up Cursor, and right here I have an empty project. I'm going to open up the terminal. And in here, I'm going to run a command, npx create-volo-app dot. This is going to create a Volo app inside of this folder. And this is a command that you can go and run. It's completely open source. It's completely free. And what it's going to do is actually create the scaffold of a full stack app for us. And it's going to go beyond something like create next app, because it's going to also hook up to the database, and it's also going to have authentication integrated directly into it. So you can see down here the command ran, and it's set up a full front end for us, as well as an API backend. It's using Firebase authentication. Right now I'm just using the emulator, which means it's running locally on my computer and not hooked up to the real Firebase just yet. And it's using a local Postgres database. This is going to be where we're going to store all of those chats, user data, all of the good stuff. And right now I can go ahead and run it locally on my computer. Now, one other cool thing about create-volo-app is that you can actually use these connect commands to then connect it to a real Firebase instance and a real Postgres database. Boom, here we go. With just this one command, I now have a server, I have a UI, I have a basic database schema for my users, and I have the app up and running. Here we go. I'm going to go to this URL. You can see it already looks pretty nice. I can just log in with any credentials. There we go. So we have the frame of our application in place, and we haven't really even had to use Cursor or any of the AI features just yet. But because of create-volo-app, we're going to be able to dive directly into the feature development instead of struggling with database and authentication setup. So it's just a really nice shortcut. I encourage you to try it out. Okay, now we got a full stack application up and running, so I'm going to switch gears and start thinking about all of the features that are necessary to create the T3 chat clone. This is an often overlooked part of the process, as people tend to just start typing into the AI chat and hoping for the best. But I've found that you get much better results by taking your time and solidifying a plan, and then having the AI agents work through that plan. And as they're doing that, you can even check off different phases of the process, and you can make steady progress and always have that plan to restart if something gets completely messed up. So I strongly encourage you to work with the AI to come up with a plan for your application before it actually starts coding. So I'm just going to start a new chat here. I'm going to go to my app.tsx file, which is essentially where everything starts. So I'll just tag app.tsx and the README page so that it has a better starting point and context of what we already have implemented. And now I'm going to describe what I actually want to build. We are building a clone of T3 chat. It is an application that allows you to specify an AI model and have a conversation with it. The tricky thing is that it integrates with several different AI providers, so we need to abstract that layer so that users can select from a number of different models and then be able to have a chat. Functionally, it is similar to ChatGPT, and we're going to have a back and forth with an AI model. Before we start coding, I want to come up with a solid plan of what we're actually going to build. So please research T3 chat and figure out the core features that we will need to implement. I can share the following requirements for this challenge. I'm going to go over to the T3 chat Cloneathon, and I'm going to copy paste these core requirements and bonus features that Theo has written out. Okay, now I'm just going to say, please come up with a comprehensive plan for all of the features that we will need to build and put it all into a plan.md file. Do not start writing code yet. We want to just solidify the plan first. Okay, and I went ahead and submitted that. So now it's doing some research, and Cursor can just automatically decide to do things like search the web or look through the files that you have in your repository. The AI agent is really on a next level. And by the way, as I was writing the prompt, you saw me using text-to-speech. This is just native dictation, so on a Windows, you just press Windows plus H. On a Mac, you press the function key twice, and you don't even need any special software to do this. All right, Cursor has done some research, and now it's creating our plan for us. All right, here we go, 500 lines of a plan. So I'm going to review this, and we'll see what we want to leave and what we want to take out, and how we might want to modify some of these requirements. Okay, now reading through the core requirements, it's talking about the AI provider abstraction layer, model management and tracking costs per model or provider, okay. Real-time model switching, that'll definitely be a part of this. So it looks like it's documenting all of the requirements, which is good. I just want to get to, okay, here we go. The technical implementation plan, weeks 1 to 2, 3 to 4. We'll see if we can do this in a few hours, okay? So let's see, phase 1, setup project. We already got all of that in place. AI abstraction layer, basic chat interface. Okay. Phase 2, multi-model support, user authentication. We already have user authentication in place. Real-time features, yes. So we will definitely need to prioritize that. Enhanced features. Okay, this seems like an okay plan. We got a bunch of APIs documented here and some additional requirements, but I want to turn it into more of something that a developer could actually work through. This is going to give an agent much more specific scope so that it can go and implement those details. So I'm actually going to refine the plan instead of going with this original plan, because this is too product heavy and we need it to be more developer focused. Now, I know we're already a ways into this video and I still haven't done any coding, but believe me, this is what coding looks like nowadays. It's thinking through all the requirements, carefully analyzing what needs to be done, and then shooting off a bunch of requests all at once so that the AI agent is going to write thousands of lines of code for us, and then it's not going to work. But we're going to be able to quickly iterate from that broken point to get a functional app. And that's something that a lot of people also miss, is that they expect AI to just get it right on the first try, and it often does not. But what you got to get used to as a software engineer is you see those issues and you just got to work through them. And then you see the next set of issues and you work through those. And if you build that habit of just working through errors and trying to understand what is going on in the software, you're going to actually be able to break out of those AI loops. You're going to be able to take AI code that doesn't quite work and make it into a working application. So it'll seem like you're just kind of stumbling around for a while, and then suddenly it all just falls into place. So with that being said, let's go ahead and refine this plan. Okay, this plan is a great documentation of all of the requirements, but I'm looking for something that's a little bit more developer focused. Let's create a separate document, which is going to be our development plan.md. And in this document, we're going to define 2 phases, one for MVP and another with additional features. For each of these phases, please separate the work into front-end development and back-end development so we can execute on them in parallel and then tie everything together. This plan should specifically be focused on the actual code and files and data structures that need to be created. Keep in mind that we already have all of the project scaffolding in place, and we have authentication and a database connection with Postgres. So please leverage the existing infrastructure for that. Okay, here we go. Now hopefully Cursor will be able to define a dev plan for us, and we're going to actually launch multiple agents that can look at that plan and then implement separate portions of it. Here we go. Here's our dev plan. It mentions our existing infrastructure, and then we have a bunch of different files that we need to write. I guess it wrote some pseudocode for some of this stuff. What I'm going to do is actually ask it to double check this plan before we get started. As I scroll down here, we have a testing strategy, and I don't really want to bother with that at the moment. Additionally, we have a development workflow of, I guess, 6 sprints, so it's supposed to take us 12 weeks to build all of this out. I'm just going to remove that part to avoid any confusion. Okay, I've reviewed this file and I feel pretty comfortable with it. So what I'm going to do now is open a new chat, and that's going to reset the context for Cursor. So now this new agent has no idea about any of the stuff we're talking about. It's able to look through these files though and find the right place to do its work. So what I'm going to do is tag this dev plan, and then I'll just ask it, please implement the phase 1 backend requirements of the dev plan. I'm just going to keep it really simple like that because it has all of the context that it needs here. I'm going to copy that, so we'll shoot that off, and I'm going to open a new chat, which we're going to run in parallel. So I'm going to copy paste that, and I'm just going to say, focus on the front end requirements of the dev plan. Now we're going to have 2 AI agents working in parallel, and let's see what it's doing. It's listing a bunch of files, it's reading a bunch of files, it's understanding the code base. And this is the power of modern AI agents. This isn't something you could do 6 months ago. And that's why this whole planning approach works so well nowadays, because the AI agents can find the relevant files. You don't have to point them to the specific code that you want to be changed. All right, so first of all, it's telling us to run this command. That all looks good. I've actually had an issue with Cursor running these commands in the side chat here. So I'm going to open a separate terminal, and I'm going to run this in the terminal down here. This is installing a bunch of different dependencies so that it can properly implement the server. And I'll just say, okay, I ran that. Now let's take a look at the new chat. Okay, it wants to add pnpm Zustand. Sure. I'm going to go to the UI, and I'll run this. All right, we got Zustand. Okay, flipping back over to the backend agent, it's getting to work. So it's created a conversation data structure for us, data structure for messages and files. So we can see that up here in the server, and there is where it's making these additional files. Looks like it's taking this class-based approach. I usually prefer functional over object-oriented, although this might make sense in this case because we do have a bunch of providers that kind of extend this base. I'm just going to let it happen, and if I don't like it, I'm just going to revert all of this backend code and we'll start over. That's the other thing to keep in mind. You don't have to get tied down to all of this code. Like, sure, it would take weeks to write all of this by hand before AI, so you wouldn't want to just experiment with something so large. But now that it only takes tens of minutes to run an experiment like this, I'm okay trying it out, and then we'll see if it works, and if it doesn't, I can adjust. So nowadays it often makes sense to take bigger risks in terms of having AI generate a bunch of code, because you'll always just be able to go back to a previous version and then try a different approach. Okay, so it is continuing. It's writing a bunch of files. Let's see how the UI one is doing. All right, it wants to add another library. I'll do that. One more thing I'll say is that I'm using Claude for Sonnet, which is an incredible AI model. If you tried to do something like this with Sonnet 3.7, you would just get a bunch of code that's disconnected from each other, and you would spend so long trying to make it work that you would just have to start over. With Sonnet 4, things like this just work. So it has really unlocked a whole new level of AI coding. All right, so we got like several files with hundreds of lines. Let's see how the UI is doing. Similar story here. And you see that these AI agents aren't interfering with each other, and that's specifically because I set up the plan so that we had UI features and backend features. So now as it's implementing all of this stuff, none of the AI agents are getting in each other's way. Later, when the app is established, what I like to do is build full stack features, and I will ask an agent to implement it across UI and backend. But as we're getting a project started, I like to just split it out like this so that they can just do a lot of work in parallel to start. Okay, looks like the backend one has reached a point at which it wants us to run a database push to update our database schema and tables. Okay, so, I'm in the UI folder. Let me go to the server. pnpm db push. Okay, so we ran into an error there. It looks like it's not connecting to the database. Yeah, so if I flip over here, it looks like the server is no longer running. And the way that I have create-volo-app set up, it's using a local database. So I'm going to have to just restart this so that I can actually execute the database commands. Or I could actually just upgrade it and start using a cloud database. Let me go ahead and do that. So I'm going to run pnpm connect database. It's going to call a script in the create-volo-app CLI, and we're going to upgrade. We're going to start using Neon as our cloud serverless database. Okay, I'm just going to create a new project. Let's say Volo Chat will be the name of my project. All right. Cool, there we go. Now it was able to run that db push, and I'm actually no longer using the Postgres on my computer, which we never really used in the first place. I am using Neon, and Neon is a serverless database. So here we are. Here is Volo Chat, and it's kind of like Supabase if you use that. I think Vercel uses Neon under the hood for all of its kind of Postgres stuff. So if I go over to SQL editor, or let me see, tables, I should have this app schema, and we currently just have users, which is actually everything for now because I don't think it actually wrote the SQL. I'm going to go ahead and stop this agent, and I'm going to say, I think we need to write the SQL files necessary to push the entire schema to the database. And I'll just remind it to make sure to use the app schema, which is what the create-volo-app uses by default. Okay, let's see how the UI is doing. All right, it has a command for us to add some shadcn components. This is the front-end library that we are using for the application looking really nice. So I'm going to run npx shadcn add all of these different things. And I'll just say, okay, I ran that successfully. Let's go back to the server, and it looks like it's fixing a couple of things and creating our additional migration file that's going to create all of the tables that we need. Okay, it's documenting the environmental variables that we need to create because Cursor does not have access to .env files by default, or at least not in my repository because I have it in the git ignore. So if you have files in the git ignore, that means Cursor's agent is not going to be able to see them. That's why it's giving me this additional file, and these are going to be the API keys that I use to actually interact with those AI services. So we'll configure that in a second, but now let's try this pnpm db push one more time. Okay, there we go. Now the changes were applied. Looks like the cloud database is being a little bit more friendly. If I refresh, we can see we have a conversations table, a files and messages table as well now. Okay, now real quick, I'm going to go and get the API keys from these different services and add it to my .env file. Okay, I got all of my API keys configured. I have ran the db push successfully and configured all of the API keys in the real.env file. What are the next steps? Let's check back on the UI agent. All right, looks like it has finished. And this is pretty nice. What I like to do after a huge working session like this, look, it wrote 19 files, 2,000 lines. I'm going to say, please do a review of the work that was completed and write a front-end status.md file that documents what has been done and what remains to be done. Also note any potential issues or errors that you see and if anything diverges from the original plan, and then I'll tag dev plan. This is going to allow the AI to do one quick double check on everything that it did, and usually it does find some things to fix, but more importantly, it gives me a starting point to be able to double check and troubleshoot various issues as I try to actually run this app. Let's go back to the backend. Okay, pnpm dev. All right, I think the backend is also pretty much ready, so let's ask it to do something similar. I'm going to copy paste that prompt, and I'll say, please do a review, and then I'll say backend instead of front end. So before we actually run the app, we're just going to have it do these double checks and make sure that everything's in place as it's supposed to be. Okay, here's our front end status. Let's read through this. Okay, complete with mock data support. That's an interesting note. So we'll see what that's about. But we got various components. I'm going to press Control-Shift-V, and that is going to show me this page in a markdown format. That way I can actually see all of these details much more nicely. Okay, these components look like they should be all good. We got multiple different pages. It seems to think that everything's pretty much in place. Okay, except we got some potential issues. Let's see, missing shadcn components. Okay, we'll double check. I thought I installed scroll area, import path, deviations. Okay, looks like it believes it to be better than what we had in the plan. Technical implementation differences, streaming, used async iteratable iterator instead of simple WebSocket for better type safety. Okay, we'll see if that works. Next steps. Okay, let me just go ahead and run this to make sure that we do have all of those components. Okay, yeah, we already did. Now let's see. Okay, validate all the routes. We had the backend server working on that. Pre-production checklist, error boundaries. Yeah, backend implementation obviously we need to do, but we've been doing that in parallel. Okay, so it's feeling pretty good about it. Let's go ahead and ask it to fix a couple of these things, like the tsconfig file. So I'll say, okay, this is great. Now, can you please make sure that the tsconfig file is proper and that we have all of the dependencies listed in package.json. I have installed all of the shadcn dependencies. Okay, we'll run that. Let's review our backend status. It's completed a bunch of components, which are not really components, but more like endpoints. We got models, conversations, messages, chats. I do wonder what's the difference between conversations and chats. We'll explore that in a bit. Integration. Okay, updated the API with all the new routes. Potential issues and deviations. Okay, the current WebSocket implementation uses upgrade WebSocket from Cloudflare workers. This may not work correctly in a Node.js environment. I actually do want to deploy this to Cloudflare workers, so I'm going to probably start running my backend with Wrangler instead of Node.js. Node.js is what is the default for create-volo-app just because everybody has it and it's the most sort of neutral option. But ultimately, I do prefer Cloudflare workers just because it's so easy to deploy to and scale. We'll keep that in mind. Let's take a look at the file storage. Files are stored locally instead of cloud storage. Yeah, we're definitely going to need to implement a cloud storage solution, and I'll probably depend on Cloudflare for that as well. Rate limiting, that's fine. We'll figure, well, actually, it's not quite fine. We will need to figure it out, but I'll leave it off for now. Missing error handling, that's okay. Okay, so all in all, the backend thinks it did a pretty good job, but it has some specific deviations. Let's try to work through those, and then we'll make sure that the integration between the front end and the back end is seamless, and then we'll actually start the app. I know I've gone so long here without even seeing if any of this is working, but again, that's just the nature of modern AI first software development. You just work through it in English. and then we'll see which errors come back with and what the UI looks like, and we're going to keep modifying it from there. Okay, so I'm going to clarify for it that we do want to use Cloudflare workers, and in fact, what I'll do is I'm going to run pnpm, let me go to server, and I'm going to run pnpm connect deploy. Actually, not server, it's the main repo, pnpm connect deploy. What this is going to do is hook me up with Cloudflare workers and pages. And this is pretty quick because it's essentially just setting up my Wrangler TOML file, which is going to be used to deploy the backend API to Cloudflare. I'll call it VoloChat API. Okay, great. So we should be able to run, I hope. Let me go to server. Let's try to run Wrangler dev. Okay, so it had an issue running that. Also, as I look at the Wrangler TOML file, it doesn't have my environmental variables. So I think this portion of create-volo-app might not be working seamlessly just yet. I'm going to move my environmental variables to this file, and then I'm going to explain what is going on here. And I'm going to tell Cursor that we do actually want to use Cloudflare workers for the backend. Okay, great. Thank you for the summary. Now, I do want to clarify that we actually want to use Cloudflare workers for the backend, so let's make sure that we are set up to do so. Right now, when I try to run Wrangler dev, I get the following error. And I'm just going to copy paste that. To be clear, the original application was running in Node.js, but we are now switching to running using Cloudflare workers with Wrangler dev to run locally. Please adjust the expectations and modify the necessary files and update the backend status file. Okay, so we'll see if that works. Now on the front end, it's basically saying, okay, it's made a couple of changes. Now it's asking to run npx tsc no emit to see if there's any compilation errors. That sounds good to me. So let's go ahead, cd UI, I'm gonna run npx tsc no emit, and there's no errors. That's pretty good. Okay, so we'll leave that be for now. Actually, you know what I'm gonna do? I want to start integrating the UI with the server. And what I usually have is a server com file that contains all of the communication. And this is what we're ultimately going to use to make the API calls from the front end. I really like separating the front end and the back end because it makes it really clear for me which things are protected from end users and which things are exposed to end users, which is something that becomes really confusing in frameworks like Next.js, which is why I made create-volo-app use this sort of split server and front end. It makes the delineation very clear. Okay, so I'm actually going to start a new chat. I'm going to stop this one, and I'm going to start a new chat instead of the UI. And I'll say in here, please look at the dev plan and the current status as reported by our developers. And I'll tag backend status and front end status. This is going to give it all the context that it needs, and it'll be able to go look into the specific files that got implemented. It essentially acts like a map that this new agent is going to be able to follow, and it has all of the information that it needs to actually build that integration. Please implement the integration between the UI and the server using the server com file. Also look for any missing or broken details. Don't start working on phase 2 just yet. Let's just make sure everything is in line for phase 1 to be completed. Okay, now going back to the backend. Okay, it's making some changes to how the environmental variables are handled, but this is actually not the approach that I want to take. I'm going to stop this because we should have a server file that is, let's see, yeah, right here, this env.ts, and this kind of abstracts some of that context setting. So I'm going to actually go back and restore this checkpoint before it started modifying all these files to switch up their env. And I'll say, keep in mind that env is handled by so we shouldn't have to modify it too much. Okay. Now this agent is working on the integration. So let's see, added a bunch of API calls and wrappers for those APIs. Now with some other frameworks, you can get this out of the box for free. Like I know TRPC allows you to essentially avoid this boilerplate entirely, but then it also becomes difficult for you to reuse endpoints and to be able to call them and expose them publicly. So I still like being very explicit about calling those specific endpoints from the UI and then having those endpoints defined and just using a standard REST API. But I will say it does add some potential failure points. So I just haven't really played around with TRPC enough to know when to use it and when not to. All right, now it's added an index.ts for the Cloudflare workers entry point, and it's making some changes. Yeah, I probably should have been clear about this before it implemented everything, because some of these different runtimes have different libraries and different things that you can do. So in our case, looks like buffers are handled differently inside of Cloudflare workers, file uploads are handled differently. And here, yeah, I mean, there's no local file storage in Cloudflare workers. So we're going to have to actually use a real storage bucket, which is, yeah, we're going to use R2. That's Cloudflare's S3 equivalent. Okay, it's making a bunch of changes. It's updating the status. That's good. 98% complete instead of 95. Well done. Okay, and this is an important note here, which is, yeah, we're going to need to upload and download with R2. Okay, so let me actually figure out what we need to do. Here's an R2 bucket. I'm going to add this to my TOML file. Now let's see if we can run the server. Okay, great. The Cloudflare, oh, nope. Okay, looks like it ran into some more errors about certain dependencies that we can't use. So I'm going to copy paste all of this. Wow, that's a lot. It looks like we got a lot of Wrangler errors. Can you please let me know what needs to be changed? Oh, actually, before I do that, I do see it says directly Node.js compat mode. Let me try that again. Okay. Still got a bunch of different dependency issues, and it is primarily because we're trying to use Cloudflare workers. Let me copy all these logs, and I'm going to say, can you please update the imports? See how the integration one is doing. Okay, looks like it's finished, and it's created an integration status file. So I'm going to read through that. 2 minor issues requiring attention. WebSocket streaming authentication. Yes, this is okay though. That's what we want. And issue number 2 is API response format inconsistency. Some backend responses wrap data in additional objects. Okay. So I think we can just instruct it to fix those issues. Okay, so the Cloudflare thing is actually fine because our server is going to use Cloudflare, but you should adjust the data structure for the responses to make sure that it is consistent across the endpoints and actually matches what the UI expects. So definitely a learning for next time. If you're going to use Cloudflare workers, definitely set that up before you write a bunch of code. Because, yeah, the runtimes have differences, and they're important to note at the start. Okay, it's finished. Let me try to Wrangler dev again. Okay, we're looking a lot better. There are only 7 errors this time. We can actually remove the embedded Postgres since we're going to use the cloud database instead. Please adjust that and remove any references to it. Yeah, that seems to be the only thing that is not working here. Is it still expecting that embedded Postgres database? Went from 95 to 98 again. Very well done. All right, checking on the integration agent. Let's see. thinks it's ready for deployment. So it's fixed the various issues, some date parsing problems. All right, it seems to think that we're pretty good on that front. Okay, the backend agent is removing the embedded Postgres. That's good. Okay, let's run pnpm install. That's what it's asking us to do. Okay, good. It removed that. Okay, great. Looks like that has been removed, but one thing I notice is that our default starting script is still using TSX instead of Wrangler dev. So can we please update the package.json files so that we have the right command to start our server? Now, actually, I'm going to just try Wrangler dev again, and we'll see if that works. Okay. Let's see. API key not found for OpenAI. That's fine. We're going to add that. I haven't actually moved that over into Wrangler TOML because the best way to do that is to do something like Wrangler secrets add, but we'll figure that out in a sec. I forget the exact command. All right, it created a development guide. Let's see. Yeah, I don't think Wrangler actually reads .env files. It either pulls them from secrets or Wrangler TOML. Okay. I'll say I don't think Wrangler reads .env. I believe I need to set Wrangler secrets or add to TOML file. You confirm how. Can you remind me how to add secrets? It looks like it got confused. It wanted to just print some text to the. Okay, here we go. CD server. Here we go. A bunch of secrets that we need to put. All right. Okay. Now let's see if this works. Wrangler dev. Okay, worker failed to start. API key not found for OpenAI. Let's see. OpenAI provider. Okay, so that didn't quite work. I wonder if it's because I'm running Wrangler locally. I'm going to try just copying those environmental variables. Okay, I got all those secrets in here for the moment. Okay, and I still get the error. So let's copy paste that. Maybe it's referencing the wrong environmental variable. I definitely have the environmental variables set now as I ran the secret put, and I also tried adding it to the Wrangler TOML, but I'm still getting this following error. Can you figure out what is wrong? Maybe we are trying to reference the wrong environmental variable, or maybe the environment isn't being properly passed. Okay, yeah, looks like it's not passing it correctly, so. One thing I notice here is that it's using some outdated models, and the same for Anthropic, and I'm guessing the same for Google, because it's just getting the old versions, because these are the latest models whenever this was trained. So after it's done doing this, I'm actually going to ask it to update these to use the latest models. Okay, it's done. Let's try that again. Wrangler dev. Ta-da! Okay, fantastic. I think it's actually working. Now let me go to server.com and see what is the port. Okay, it's trying to use the Vite API URL, which I think now it looks like our server is running on 8787. So I just need to make sure that's where we're running this. Yeah, I think it's referring to that. Okay. So our server is running. Let me back up. I'm going to go back to Volo chat, and I think we're ready to try this out. pnpm dev. This should start the server, the UI, and my Firebase emulator. Speaking of which, we should probably upgrade to using real production Firebase since we're already using real production database and Cloudflare. So, okay, everything is technically running. So let me go to the front end. I'll just log in. Okay, we got something here. It's got some marketing kind of materials. I don't think I really need that. Let's try start chatting. Okay, we got some conversations in here. If I go to this one, looks like we got a message. We got an AI chatbot message. But hey, look, the application runs, which is great news. Now, I don't know where this is all coming from. I think it's just hard-coded. But let's see if we're getting any API calls coming through here. Okay, so Wrangler is actually getting called. I think it is actually deploying it on the right port. Okay, required environmental variable Firebase project ID. I don't think I ever set that, and I think I deleted it from... No, wait, it should be there. I'm also getting these unauthorized errors. So here's where we start troubleshooting and getting the application to work end to end. And then we're going to get to the features and iterating on the features, because we'll have most of the core of the application actually built out already. Okay, let me just copy paste these logs, because I think there are some things getting mixed up here. We might actually be running 2 servers. Okay, so it looks like the full stack is up and running, but I'm getting some errors in the logs. So can you see what is going on and make sure we're not running the Node.js server, but only running the Wrangler version of the server? Wow. Looks like Cursor has decided to expose all of my environmental variables publicly through this env test endpoint. Which is definitely a problem. And this is the kind of thing that you want to watch out for, because you could be exposing all of your API keys. Even if you do this sort of clean separation of concerns where you have the server and the client, you could still have AI write code for you that's going to create an endpoint that just displays all of your environmental variables. That's quite a problem. We definitely don't want that. But the server should be restarted, so I'm just going to refresh. And I'm getting these unauthorized errors. And I'm still getting the Firebase project ID. At this point, this chat has written 2,500 lines of code and 34 different files. I think it is time to retire it. And thankfully, we have those status MD files that have kind of documented everything that has been implemented. So I'm actually going to start a new chat, and we're going to see if we can figure this issue out from scratch. Right now we have the full stack application up and running, and I see that the Cloudflare worker has access to the environmental variables when it starts up, but for some reason I'm getting the following error. Can you figure out what is wrong? And then I'll paste the same logs, and then I'll paste those logs as well, because things seem to be correct. While it's doing that, I'm actually going to go ahead and update the APIs for the various AI providers. I'm just going to start a new chat here. I'll say, right now we have outdated models listed in the Anthropic, Gemini, and OpenAI providers. Please do a web search to find the latest models and update the relevant files. And then I'll just say context, dev plan, and plan. I want to make sure I don't forget to remove this endpoint, because that's pretty risky. Yeah, let me do that now. Let me restart the service. Okay. Nope, still getting the same error. I took a break, and now getting back to this, I'm pretty sure I know where the issue is, and it was a bug in my create-volo-app, which I have since fixed, so the latest version of the CLI should have this working seamlessly, but it has to do with how the app detects whether it is a Node.js or a Cloudflare workers environment. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to restore this checkpoint when I was first asking it, and then I'm going to actually just change this and make sure that it is always false. Basically, we just always want to set the environment based on the request, which is how Cloudflare workers is supposed to work. So now that we're going to set that, let me just erase these lines. Okay, now let's go ahead and restart the server again. All right, if I refresh, it's going to let me log in. Okay, a database URL is required. It should be coming from the Wrangler TOML file, but it looks like it's not actually here. So I'm going to go ahead and set it here. And again, this is something that is fixed in the latest version of create-volo-app, so you won't run into this issue. Connecting to server. There we go, ready to chat. Let's start chat. All right, it's loading models. That looks like it's stuck, but let's try starting a new conversation. And that looks like it threw an error as well. So let me start a new chat, and we're going to describe the specific issues that we're seeing so that Cursor can start fixing those. This is perfectly expected. We just wrote like 40, 50 different files. So yeah, things aren't going to work perfectly. You just got to go through issue by issue and fix it. So I'll just say we have just completed the initial work and dev plan, and then I'm going to tag all of these status files so that it knows where we stand. I am seeing the following issues. The model list never seems to load. We have some mock data described throughout the app, which we need to remove in favor of real integrations and actual chats. Currently scrolling in the chat looks to be kind of messed up because it doesn't account for the header that we have as part of our app. So it kind of scrolls the header of the chat out of view when I scroll down. We should actually get rid of the header inside of the chat and have the model drop down in the bottom where the user writes their message. We should move the chat history, like the previous chat list, into the app sidebar. So we have just one sidebar and not multiple ones. Please go ahead and work through these features. It looks like it got a little confused and asked me to run the application, but I'm asking it to look at the code, not the application itself. So we'll see. All right, it's done a bunch of changes. It's deleting that additional sidebar, deleting the mock data. Okay, it's completed all of the changes, so let's refresh and see what we got. All right, that is looking a lot cleaner. Now we are immediately here. Got new conversation. Let's try to start a new one. When I click that button, it says no model selected. So there seems to be a problem where it wants the model to be selected before I can start conversation. Okay, the UI looks a lot cleaner, but right now when I click the start new conversation button, it gives me the following error. I think this is a fundamental flaw with the logic that we have configured, because the user should only have to select a model when they are sending a message, not when they are starting a conversation, because they should be able to specify the model on a message level rather than a conversation level. Additionally, we should have a default model pre-selected, which would be the Gemini Flash model. Okay, it's making some changes, but I just saw this message and I clicked stop because this doesn't actually make sense, so let me clarify for it. There should be no such thing as a model not being selected because we have a default and there is a drop down for all of the possible models. So we don't need an additional message in case one is not selected, since that should be impossible. Okay, Let's refresh. Start a new conversation. It still has a problem. Let's copy paste the error. And looks like we got some error in the logs now. Getting this error when trying to start a new conversation. Okay, there are some mismatches between the data types. And again, this is stuff that you're going to expect when you create a bunch of files all in parallel. That's fine. You're still going to code a lot faster by doing all of this and then fixing the bugs instead of doing it properly the first time around, but taking your time doing one file at a time. Okay, looks like it's trying to replace all of these IDs. I'm going to stop it because it keeps failing. I'm just going to replace this myself. Whoa, I did some real coding right there. Did you see it? Okay, I do notice there are a couple of type errors. There we go. That's probably what it meant. Over here, I'm not sure what is wrong with this file, but let's refresh and see what happens. Okay, here we go. We're able to actually start a new conversation. That's good. And if I refresh, there we go. We can actually see the conversation in the log. So if I start a new one, now we're going to want to clean this up. We don't need these little dots. We don't need all of these dates and stuff. We don't need a chat button. This is still loading, which is kind of concerning to me. So let's figure that out, and then we'll work on the cleanup a little bit later. Okay, this all looks pretty good, and I'm able to actually start a chat and see it in the sidebar, which is a great start, but right now the models never load. So can you see what is going on with that endpoint? Meanwhile, I think I will start a separate chat actually so that I can start working through some of the styling stuff. I'll go to app sidebar. We need to greatly simplify the way that we display the previous conversations in the sidebar. Essentially, we just want to show the titles of the chats rather than any additional details like the date or the number of messages or an extra bullet point and stuff like that. Please reduce it to the bare minimum, which is just the title of the chat. Actually, let's also have some subtle sections, which is today, yesterday, and then past conversations. There's no functional difference between these sections. They just help visually split up some of the conversations. Okay, looking back at this, it looks like there's an issue with the API keys. We shouldn't need API keys to list the models. We shouldn't need the API keys to list the models. They should just be coming from a static list of models that our app currently supports. Okay, it's asking to accept sidebar changes first. I've done that. Okay, now it's starting to clean things up. Oh, that was a very quick change, I guess. Okay, there we go, but we still have this bullet point. I still see a bullet point above the actual title of the chat, and I'm wondering if it might be some kind of CSS issue. Okay, now we got models that should be a static list. Let's see. Start a new conversation. Okay, we got a list of models. Hey, that doesn't look too bad. It has some descriptions, some pricing, all this stuff. Okay, we're going to want to make this look nicer, but it's great that we are at least rendering this information in some way. This is similar to the real T3 chat. But all of the models show unavailable, so let's figure out what's going on with that. Okay, this is looking much better, but all of the models are showing up as unavailable. What is determining that? Okay, the UI one has made adjustments, so now we got a really clean conversation thing here. That's good. Now the other thing is we want a chat to be open right away and not have to press that new chat button. So let's ask it to make that change. Okay, this is looking good, but there are further UI changes that we need to make. The sidebar should simply have a new chat button and not a home and chat section because this whole application is only about chat. we can simply deprecate the current home page entirely. When the user arrives at the app, they should see the chat interface immediately. And a new conversation only gets created when they actually submit their first message. All right, it'll work on that. Let's flip back here. Okay, I think it's because of the Wrangler, the way I set up the Wrangler environment again. So I'm going to go make changes to this to make sure that my API keys are in the Wrangler file, which I removed at one point. Again, this stuff is all cleaned up in the latest version of create-volo-app. Okay, I went ahead and restarted the server with those API keys specified. Let's refresh. Oh, I have to log in again. Okay, no conversations yet. This is looking really a lot cleaner. I like that. We still have the start new conversation thing. Okay, that's because it wants us to accept the previous version of app first. Now it's making some changes. All right, it's made the changes to the layout. Let's take a look. All right, when I refresh, cool, we see Gemini Flash. Here's the default. Sweet. I can actually choose between these different models. I wonder if it'll work. Let's give it a try. Hey there, what model are you? I submitted a message. Okay, I got a large language model trained by Google. It's a little clunky right now, but we're going to clean all of that up. Let's see if it retains the message. Okay, cool. Look at that. So obviously we got some message history support. And let me actually start a new chat. We're going to have to actually name chats. Oh, look, when I open it, it actually loads the proper chat. So that's good. Let's try talking to Sonnet 4. Please write me some code to solve FizzBuzz. Okay, when I press enter, it didn't immediately send. Okay, AI is thinking. It doesn't seem to be streaming in this case. So that's interesting. But boom, look at that. It's able to generate a bunch of code for us. That's really nice. We're going to want to use some kind of nice markdown handler here, which we'll do in a second. But yeah, I'm pretty confident this is Sonnet 4 responding here. That's great. I'm kind of curious to see if any of the file handling works. Let me try to attach an image and ask something about it. Okay, I'll attach. All right, I've attached an image. What do you see in this image? Okay, this is super quirky looking, and this absolutely makes no sense. So definitely need to work out the file hosting thing, because I don't think we're even uploading the files anywhere. So I'm not sure how it's sending those files, but we'll get to that in a minute. First, I want to fix up this layout, make the model selector a little nicer, and start naming the conversations. So let's just note down everything that we need to do, and then this essentially becomes the phase 2 of our development, I believe. The good news is that we do have a multi-model AI chat working with conversation history being stored in a database. So pretty big win. Obviously, it took a little while of troubleshooting issues after the initial code was written, and we'll probably want to go back and review all of this code, make sure that it is actually solid. But for now, I just want to work on some of the layout, fix some of these bugs. Let's do that. I'm going to accept all. Over here and over here as well. So I think we are pretty much starting from scratch in a new chat. I'm going to actually ask it to summarize the current state of the application so that I just have one document that is going to drive this next phase of development. So I'm tagging all of these documents that have tracked our status, and I'm going to say that we've also fixed several issues, and here I'm going to tag the previous chats so that this agent has all of the relevant context. Given all of this context, please create a new file which is called lateststatus.md that catalogs all of the things that are complete and the next steps for the project. All right, here we go. Let's take a look through this latest status document. Production ready. It's production ready, guys. Okay. No, not really. Let's review though. Okay, upload, download, metadata management ready for R2. Yeah, we're gonna have to hook that up. Let's see. Looking down here, we still have some models that are outdated here. I think this agent just didn't actually look at those files, so I'm gonna have to fix that up. Cloudflare environment, yeah, we're using that. We got all these endpoints. Okay, so this is all fine, but the thing I think it's missing is a better overview and summary of what this application does and what it's designed to do, because I think that's going to be necessary context for this next phase. So let me ask it to add that information. Okay, this is a great summary of what has been completed, but I would like you to infuse more of the details of what the app is about and how it's supposed to work so that we can use it as a foundation for our next phase of development. And whoever reads this document has the full context of what's going on. Okay, it's put together a lot more details about what the app should include. So now it's talking about, I guess, primary users and target audience and how it compares to all this stuff. I'm not sure if we really need all of those details. Let me ask it to tone it back a little bit, because ultimately this document, I know I'm spending a lot of time on it, but it's going to drive the whole next set of development. So when I ask AI to build something for me, I'm going to be referencing this document so it gets all of the necessary context. That's how I'm going to make sure that the AI, even though this code base is growing, I'm going to make sure that AI is able to continue to make progress and find all of the relevant files instead of getting just completely lost. That's why I'm taking this sort of document-driven development approach. Okay, that's better, and I appreciate the fact that you added the details about how the app works, but right now there are too many marketing and other arbitrary details in this document which we simply do not need, because it is supposed to be a developer-focused document. Please remove those types of sections and replace them with names of specific files that may need to be referenced when working on a specific set of functionality. Okay, I think this is probably good enough. This acts essentially like a map for all of the files that explains the context of how they apply to the bigger picture. Now I'm going to go ahead and shift to essentially the next phase of development based on this document. Consider this latest status document the current state of the application. We have several features that we need to adjust. Please work on the following. The main chat area needs to be more visually pleasing with additional padding on the sides and a floating input box for the user's chat message. Additionally, the attachment and model selection buttons should be below the input box for the user's message. We should have clean, seamless multi-line support that extends at least for a few lines if necessary, and then begins to scroll. We need to properly name our conversations and have the AI generate the names for them. We can use the default Gemini Flash model for doing this. Essentially, when the first message is sent and a response is generated, we should create a name for the conversation and then rename it and make sure that it stays with the new name both in the database and in the UI. Instead of the current chat bubbles with emojis, we should just have a super minimal setup where it's clear that your messages are on the right with the lighter background and the AI message is on the left. We can include the model name in the bottom left corner so that it is clear which model actually made the response. And we should move the copy button to the bottom right corner. Currently we are able to upload images, but they do not show up as a neat little preview in the input box or in the message that got sent. Please modify the logic so that we can get a preview of the image. It seems that there is something wrong with submitting images to the API, so can you please troubleshoot and make sure that we are using the proper APIs to upload the images. Specifically, the service that I tried was Anthropic with the Sonnet 4 model, which should be able to accept images as input. If they need a public URL so that the model can access them, please let me know, and we should plan to do work to integrate with R2 to host the images. Okay, I think that's plenty for it to work through, so let's get it started. Oh, and I just remembered another thing, which is that we need streaming to work, because waiting for that full Sonnet message is not a very good user experience. So we'll follow up after it works through some of these first. Actually, let me go ahead and start a new chat and we'll see if we can implement the streaming. Right now, when we submit a message, we get the AI message back, but it waits until the AI completes the full message instead of doing a sort of real-time streaming approach. Can you please investigate the logic for that and implement the necessary changes so that we can get a streaming response in our UI? And then I just tag the latest status so it has more context. All right, looks like it's working through the generate title logic. It keeps referencing these old models that are no longer available, I think. So, okay, and it hit the 25 tool call. Let's just resume the conversation. See how this one's doing. Okay, it's stuck because, yeah, the other AI made changes to this file. Sometimes you can get past this sort of concurrent changes if you run two instances of Cursor side by side pointed at different folders, or you could potentially even do it in the same workspace, although I haven't tried that. But what you essentially do is use git work trees to clone the repository into two separate folders on your computer, and then you can have AI agents that are going to work on that. The challenge is you're still going to have to resolve the merge conflicts later on your own, but it can be a way to get past some of this back and forth that the AI agents will have. Okay, it's taking a look at the attachment. Looks like it needs it to be in base 64. Okay, that's cool. All right, it is adding WebSockets, which sounds great. We're probably going to want to check the security on that, so just a mental note. And then this one is continuing. Okay, this one thinks it's done. I'm going to just stop it there. So streaming is supposed to work. We'll see if it actually works. But this one is still continuing to work through some of the bigger changes that I asked. Okay, let me go to this chat file. This is getting pretty big. Yeah, these are... Oh, actually, we'll just type them as any, whatever. I had hit the 25 tool call again. Let's resume it. This one has done it twice now, so definitely a lot of changes, but that's fine. Okay, this one is finally complete. So we had a bunch of different features that it worked through. Let me refresh. Okay, hey, the layout looks way nicer. Take a look at that. It's centered. We got the model picker over here. Nice attach button. This is looking a lot better. I'll probably still polish this up a little, but I'm pretty happy with it. Let's start a new chat. Okay, it adds it to the side. We'll fix that, but I'll send a message. We'll say, hey there. I'm not happy with this AI is thinking thing. And it still has all of these additional details that I don't really want there. And it looks like it's kind of getting stuck. So yeah, there we go. It doesn't have a WebSocket connection here. Maybe if I restart the server, I'll try that out. Okay, it's loaded. You know, I am also noticing that it's making this API call like so many times, and we're definitely going to want to troubleshoot why that's happening. Yeah, still no WebSocket connection. So we might need to host that on a separate port or something. Let's take a look. Let's talk to this one that did this implementation. Please take a look at the current code and see if it is actually ready for streaming, because I get the following error when I try to run it in the UI. Should our server be hosting a WebSocket, or do we need to host it on a different port or something? We are using Cloudflare workers and running locally with Wrangler dev for context. 5700. No, that is the port of our backend. I'm just going to stop it right there. No, the port is actually correct, which we specify when we start the application. And the rest of the API works properly, but the WebSocket component does not. Okay, Wrangler Dev doesn't fully support WebSocket upgrades in the same way that production environment does. Well, that's interesting. Okay, but it has some kind of other approach. Create a simple HTTP streaming endpoint. You know what? That would be perfect, because I'm pretty sure that's how ChatGPT actually does it. I don't know if they actually use WebSockets. I thought it was HTTP streaming the way their API worked. We'll see. Okay, it's made those changes. Let's refresh. Okay, you know what? That actually worked. I saw it kind of stream there. And we actually have the title get updated, which is super cool. If I refresh, okay. Although I did see an error, and yeah, we really got to figure out why that's happening. But we can see our previous chat. We can see the date, the model. Let me try a different model in the same chat here, because that was part of the requirement. How are you doing today? Okay, now it looks like we had some kind of issue because it failed to pass SSE event. I wonder if that's an issue with every model or just Anthropic. Let me start a new chat and I'll say, please write a function for FizzBuzz. Okay, so now we see the streaming is definitely working, but we do also see these errors. I'll copy paste all of this to the AI and we'll see if we can work through that. Okay, so it looks like the streaming is working at least at a minimum, because I do see some of the chunks appearing in the message block. However, I'm not sure if they're out of order or if there are some dropped chunks or something like that, because I'm seeing these errors in the console logs. Additionally, when I switched models halfway through the conversation, the second message didn't seem to come through at all. Can you investigate where the issue might be? Okay. Yeah, SSE events can be split across multiple stream chunks. I guess some lower level buffer kind of handling stuff. Hopefully that fixes it, but we might have to troubleshoot that. I think that is kind of a core requirement. Streaming definitely improves the user experience. Okay, it's made some changes. It added some logs. Let's give it another try. I'm going to start a new chat. Please write a function to solve FizzBuzz. Okay, here we go. This is looking really smooth. Ooh, nice, nice, nice. And look, it's scrolling down as the message is continuing. It's turning it into code blocks. That was flawless. Okay, amazing, amazing. Here's an alternative version. Okay. Fantastic. Can you summarize what this function is supposed to do for someone who is completely unfamiliar with the problem? Okay, amazing. And if I, let's see, okay, if I scroll up, it shoots me back down there. Okay, and we obviously need a better way to display Markdown. So we'll do that next, but let's try to switch to a different model. You know what, we haven't tried, let's try GPT-4o Mini. What do you think about this problem in general? Boom. Now we got 4o Mini answering this question. So we got the core requirement working here of being able to interweave these different models, and we can see which model made the response. And obviously it's getting all the relevant context of the whole conversation, because when I asked this question, what do you think about this problem in general, it had to know about FizzBuzz from these previous messages. So we got some good context management in there. This is looking pretty good. I think there's still ways to clean up this UI. I definitely want to make it use Markdown. We got titles in here, which is nice. So if I switch between these conversations, we can see that they have new titles. If I refresh, we can go back to these chats and they're going to load. It's pretty good performance as well. So let's see, we can start a new chat. Let's message, let's maybe ask a reasoning model. Do we have O3 here? No, it doesn't look like it. But I think Opus should be Claude 4 Opus. Let's give that a try. Write a poem about a sunny day. Okay, it's just going for it. I wonder how we're handling thinking under the hood. We'll take a look at that in a little bit. Let me check one more thing and see how the images look now. If I attach an image, nice, look at that. We can get a preview of it right here. I should be able to click on it and see it, but let's give this a try. What do you see in this image? And I'll switch to, let's say, Sonnet. Small bird, no, that doesn't sound right. So there's still something going on with the image upload. We'll need to follow up on that. Okay, so we're off to a pretty good start here, but there are some things that we still need to modify. I want it to show the actual image in here. I want this to use markdown formatting so that we can see it nice and neat. This title generation doesn't seem right. And we have some issues where we're showing this message many times. Maybe for every conversation, we'll take a look and we'll just write up the next set of requirements for AI to work through. Okay, going back here, I'm just going to open a new chat. I'm going to tag that latest status, and it looks like it actually failed. Let's see what's going on here. Here, I'm just going to restart it fresh. Okay, there we go. Now I'm going to again tag the latest status and say, we need to make the following adjustments. Please use a proper markdown rendering tool or library to display the content of the messages in our chat. When there is a file attached to a message, we should be able to see a preview of that file, particularly if it is an image. And then we should be able to click on that image to be able to take a closer look at it. The same applies to any attachment in a new message as well. Now I'm going to copy all these logs and tell it that I think it's strange that we're logging all of that. When we first open the app, I see the following in the console logs. The fact that we are doing this so many times suggests to me that there is some sort of rendering issue or loop, and we need to reduce it so that we're not making all of these duplicated API calls. Let's just start with those few issues in this chat, and then perhaps we will handle some of the other stuff like the Anthropic image submission in a separate chat. I'm going to open a new one. I'll tag Anthropic specifically. And I'll say, right now when we submit images to the API, it doesn't seem to receive the correct image. Can you please make sure that our integration is correct? And then I'll tell it to search the web for examples. Okay, this chat is telling us to add a few different libraries. I'll run that. I'll go over to this chat, make sure we accept all so that it unblocks further changes. Interesting. The WebSocket streaming didn't include the missing attachment. I wonder if that's because we had two agents working on this logic in parallel and they might have overwritten each other's stuff. There's another issue with the title generation. I'm going to see if we can fix that. There seems to be an issue with the title generation where it often just responds with the title that is the same thing as the actual prompt that we're supposed to submit to the AI model. It may be an issue with the AI model itself, but let's use Gemini 2.5 Flash just in case. Also, please troubleshoot the logic to make sure that it is working as expected. And I'm going to see, do we have a title file? Where's the title generation? Okay, I think it's in this chat file, which we should move to a separate file. Let's create a separate utility file for this chat generation instead of having it inside of the API endpoint itself. Okay, taking a look at the markdown one, that's continuing to work. This one is waiting for us to approve other file changes. It looks like there's an issue with some of the state management. This is a little messy. Okay, wants to add dialogue. Let's do that. What is it trying to do with these icons? This is kind of confusing to me. Make sure we are not duplicating logic in terms of the file upload, because I think we already have that in place. And it looks like we're importing two separate files for doing the same thing. Just double check what you're doing, because the focus was really on doing the markdown and the performance issues, and then being able to see the image when I click on it, which was already in place in the chat input. In other words, there was a small image that I should be able to click, which I wasn't able to click before. So just making sure that it stays on track. This one thinks it's done. Let's try to submit an image and see what happens. Oops. Okay, it's actually rewriting the file. Oh. Dialogue already exists. Dialogue already exists, you can use it. This chat seems to be getting confused. Okay, now it's added a dialogue, so we should be able to see the image when we click on it. I'm going to remove that extra code there. Why is it adding an eye icon to the message bubble? Doesn't make any sense to me. Just kind of waiting for it to finish here, but confused. Okay, it thinks it's done. Let's just refresh. Attach. I'll upload an image. Okay, cool, sweet. I can actually preview it. That looks good. Nice. And then I can remove it. Excellent. All right. Now what do you see in this image? I'm gonna try the Sonnet one since it was working on that one. And we got a bunch of errors. Okay. Whoa, it kind of messed up our chat over here. Yeah, wait a second. What's going on here? What happened to all of our chats? Well, this looks good. We're now only calling it once. But that was kind of strange. I'll definitely have to do some further testing. What do you see in this image? Okay, so it says that it can't find the R2 integration, and this one is saying generate a very short message. So basically none of our features actually got built. That's kind of annoying. I'm gonna start a new chat because I'm just not happy with how this agent is handling things. But let me try one more thing. I want to see how the markdown appears. Create a response that shows off various types of markdown format. Okay, so this is looking really nice. I didn't like how it was shoving me to the bottom there. We definitely need this message to be wider, but it is looking very correct in terms of the markdown formatting, and I love this different language styling here. We even got a markdown table. Okay, so the markdown works. The title generation does not. It never actually finished working on that. Let's approve that. Now it's going to import the title generation. We'll see if that got fixed. I'm kind of curious to see if things are actually getting stored in my database. So let's go over to Neon. Over to Volo chat. Take a look at our tables. Yes, okay, we got all these messages. Yeah, of course we're storing them because when I load the conversations, I can actually see them. There's a model ID at the conversation level, which is incorrect. We'll have to fix that. There should be a model. Yeah, there's a model at the message level. That's good. Looks like there's this attachments and storage path. Yeah, we're going to need to start using real R2 bucket to store these images so that we can consistently upload them to the service. I like how it didn't believe me that there's a 2.5 flash. There. Okay, let's try this again. I'm gonna refresh. We'll do a new chat. And in here I'll say, write a poem about birds. Okay, now it's giving me a different bad title. Write a poem about, well, that might actually be the correct title. I don't know. Let's say, tell me about your favorite soda. Okay, again, this title does not look correct. Now the title seems to be just the first few words of my prompt instead of the actual title. Please inspect the way that we are calling the LLM provider in this case versus how we are doing it through our regular chat, because that seems to be working just fine, but this title generation logic is not. Make sure that the actual messages get past this context and that it is done correctly. Wonder if there's an error here. Yeah, okay. Title generation failed. No provider found for model 2.5 Flash. Ah. Okay, yeah. Okay. This is the model. It needs, okay, it's going to use this other model. Taking a look at this, let's see. I don't think this actually worked, so I'm going to stop that one. Okay, since the title one finished, let me try it again. Tell me about your favorite soda. Okay, awesome. Favorite soda discussion. That's great. Let me see if this search works. Okay, that's good. How about, okay, it is just keyword search, so if I type in Coca-Cola, it's not finding that chat. That would be a nice feature to add, is like semantic search on top of these conversations, but definitely a little bit more difficult. Let's fix the image upload issue, because I'm just going to start using actual file hosting service, which is going to be R2 by Cloudflare. It fits naturally with everything we got going on here, and it's the necessary step, I think, for handling file uploads. I'm going to tag the latest status, and then I'll say, please implement the necessary code to integrate with R2 for file hosting, so that when a user uploads their files, we put it into an R2 bucket only when they actually submit their message, so that we don't have orphaned files. And then we submit the URL of those files to the AI models so that they can be properly processed. I'm not sure exactly the format that the AI providers expect files to be submitted in, but I believe that storing the files is going to help us achieve this. It will also show the files when users come back to the app and see their previous chat. So we'll have this one start working on that. This is going to handle some of the file uploading issues. Now, I do want to clean up the interface a little bit further, and we're going to remove some of this additional stuff and have this extend further and remove some of that typing. It doesn't look very good. I'll tag latest status again, and then I'll say, please improve the aesthetic of the chat to make it even more minimal, so we don't see any of the dates under each message, and we don't see a typing ... message under the AI chat box. We should just see the words start to appear as the AI responds with them, ideally with some sort of CSS animation so they're not just popping up into the chat. Also, we would like the message boxes to be wider so that the AI message reaches pretty much across the entire chat space instead of being constrained to the left half. Finally, the AI can just write directly onto the canvas instead of appearing in a sort of bubble form like the user messages. This is a purely visual distinction. Before the AI has responded, we should show 3 dots that are kind of bobbing up and down, so that there is still an indication that the AI is going to respond momentarily. We just don't want the blue typing message. All right, we'll send it off to work on that. This one is working on the files. Okay, the one with the UI changes is done. So let's take a look at that. If I refresh, I am concerned that I don't see any conversations here. Okay, I see, the server is being reloaded all the time right now, so that's why we don't see that, because the other AI agent is still doing some work. Okay, this one is finished, and it's telling us to do this pnpm db push that's going to add a couple of fields to our database. And go to the server, db push. All right, awesome. And we can see this is where we added the R2 support. So Drizzle is keeping track of our database schema and the changes we're making to it as we evolve the app. All right, let's go ahead and give this another try. I'm going to refresh. Okay, it looks like the server is down. I think I need to restart it. Sometimes when AI makes changes to a lot of files, something just goes wrong with the auto restarting functionality. So you just got to pnpm dev rerun the server, and then you should be good to go. So here we go. Okay, now if I refresh, log in. This is a different user that I logged in, so I don't see my chats, and that's perfectly fine. Let me upload that image again. I'll use Sonnet. What do you see in this image? I'll submit, and then we'll see. Nope. Oh, wait. Something started happening, but then it totally failed. Okay, let me refresh that. The conversation doesn't seem to exist. That's weird. Yeah, that seems to have broken the chat endpoint. Actually, I think this broke in another chat where we fixed the state loading. I think I need to do new conversation and then send the message. Okay, hey, look at that. The 3 dots look super nice. Whoa, this styling is actually really nice. I think we should show the model name maybe at the bottom after it's done, but wow, I like that. Can you create a document that shows me a bunch of different markdown formats? Just want to make sure that still appears correct. Wow, okay, that was a little crazy, but it is, okay, it's looking pretty good, although some things got kind of messed up about it. Okay, and the copy works. Let me fix that issue that as it's writing, it keeps snapping up and down. I don't like that. And then we also need to fix the issue of sending a message in a chat that doesn't exist yet. Actually, yeah, and let me try out the R2 thing. Okay. What do you see in this image? Okay, seems like the image isn't being sent. When I tried to send an image to Sonnet, it doesn't seem to be able to see the contents of that image. Can you please double check our integration with Anthropic and search the web to figure out if we're doing something wrong? I also want to be able to click on that. Let me refresh. It does load the chat, although it does it slowly. I'm not very happy with that. Why does it take so long? It's almost like it's waiting for something else to happen. Yeah, it's like I have to click on it. And let me check. Let's take a look at the files. Okay, we got the promo poster here. It still looks like it's referencing this files/something something instead of like a real URL. When I take a look at the files collections, all of the paths look like, is this what I should expect? I'm also not able to see a preview of the actual image that is part of a message when I have already sent that message. Please investigate. Okay, now in the styles, I'll clarify. Okay, this is looking really good, but one thing that is really distracting is when new message chunks arrive and the UI scrolls us to the bottom, it creates this super jittery effect where the chat becomes longer and we haven't scrolled yet, and then suddenly it jolts to the bottom. So it keeps moving up and down like crazy when new message chunks are arriving. Can you please correct that so we just stay at the bottom of the screen and everything scrolls smoothly to the bottom? If I scroll up during a message, it should stop scrolling me to the bottom until I scroll all the way back down, at which point it can resume. It's a little tricky, but keep in mind the ideal user experience. Let's take a look at this one. Issue analysis. Based on the investigation, Anthropic image format, according to image should be sent either as public URLs or base64 data. And I think we probably want to use the base64 because that way we're going to be able to keep those images private instead of exposing them. Although they would be secure through obscurity through our file IDs, but that's still not ideal. Okay, well, it's making some changes. Okay, it's giving me some additional checks. Let me refresh. I'm going to create a new chat. And let me try to upload an image again. What do you see in this image? Okay, it's still having a problem with that. I wonder if the image is uploaded. I'm going to actually ask it to add logs in all of the relevant places to help it troubleshoot and point out the specific issue. Can you please add logs throughout the files to help me pinpoint the specific issue when I upload a file? Okay, I think I'm going to take another break and then I'll come back and we'll figure out how to get the images and the uploading working properly. We might have to dive into the code a little bit more. Okay, let's keep going. Now, I did make one tiny change off camera that I forgot to record, which was simply keeping the chat input hovering over top of the text over here instead of always sticking to the bottom. But let's continue to figure out what is going on with R2 and make sure that we have the bucket properly set up. I took a look at Cloudflare and it looks like we do not currently have any sort of binding for an R2 bucket provisioned, so we should be able to set that up via Wrangler and then we'll get it all hooked up. I checked R2 and indeed we do not have a bucket set up just yet. So can you tell me the commands that I need to run to set up the bucket and then update Wrangler toml file so that everything is in place? Okay, here's the command to get Wrangler going. Yeah, I'm not sure what's up with this compatibility date thing. Let me try just running this. Okay, and here's the R2 buckets that we should add. I'm going to go ahead and add this to my Wrangler toml file. Okay, I have ran the command and it has created the bucket and I have added the R2 buckets section to the toml file. I'm not sure that the R2 public URL is correct though, so can you tell me what it should be set to and tell me the next steps? Okay, great. It has updated it to include my ID. Actually, let me clarify about this public thing because I'm not sure that we need to do that, but it might be a requirement of the APIs. Can you confirm that the AI APIs require us to actually have these files be publicly available and to send it the URL? Or can we actually just pipe the files into the API somehow? I'd prefer not to expose the files that my users upload publicly, even if I obscure it somehow. But if the public URL is required, then I suppose that's what we need to do. You're absolutely right to be concerned. Okay, I don't need public URLs. Great. So they all support sending base64 data directly. That's much more secure. Great, we'll do that. Okay, now it's realizing that there was really just a metadata mismatch in how we were taking those files. That's kind of interesting. I do think we still want to host those files because we're going to want to show them to the user when they come back to the app. So we do still want to host them, but I think we can do that privately and then retrieve them through our server, obviously, instead of just like public URLs. All right, let me try it first and then we'll see what happens. Let's try a new chat. What do you see in the image? It says, please provide the image. Okay, actually, I don't know if this model can do it or not. What do you see in this image? Okay, it looks like we're getting this sort of error here. Let's see what's going on there. I'm getting the following errors. Additionally, we should continue to actually store the files in R2 so that we can show them to the user after they come back to the app and view the conversation in the future. But we should still use the base 64 approach to send the data to AI models. All right, let's see how that goes. Now, this chat is getting pretty long. We've been having a conversation about this for a while, so I'm probably going to start a new one if this doesn't work. I thought we just explicitly decided to not enable public access. All communication with R2 should be happening between the worker and R2 in private. Okay, it's continuing to make some changes. It's modifying some console logs. Okay, let's give this another try. What do you see in the image? Whoa, something trippy happened here. Looks like we got two different responses. Somehow we triggered two API calls at the same time or something. Strange. Okay, we got some errors. We'll copy those. Actually, I'm just going to start a new chat now because, yeah, this one keeps getting confused. Let me close this. We'll have the summary there. We are working on a feature that allows users to submit images to AI models as part of their message. And to do that, we are trying to convert the images into base 64 so they can be properly sent. But something is going wrong, and we need to figure out what that is. Separate from submitting to the AI, we also want to host these files in an R2 bucket so that users can actually see those images when they go back to their conversation later. We do not want to use public URLs because we do not want to expose these user files to the internet. And all communication for R2 should happen through the Cloudflare workers privately. Can you figure out what is wrong and fix it? And then I also pasted some of those logs that we were seeing. Okay, there might be a race condition. Looks like it's adding a bunch of logs, so I expect that it probably won't fix it just yet, but we're going to run it, and then we're going to paste the logs back in, and then it'll fix it. Okay, let's give this another try. Let's try this $sign. What do you see in this image? Let's try Sonnet. Whoa, okay. Hey, take a look at that. 3-dimensional golden $sign. It's stylized with metallic gold colored. Great. That might have actually worked. Let's see. I'm going to send another one. Let's see. How about in this image? And let's see if we can get another model to do this one. How about GPT-4o? Okay. I wonder if that's an issue specifically with our OpenAI adapter, so to speak, because it seems like Sonnet is actually able to read these messages now. Let me try. Yeah, okay. So 4.0 is having some issues with that, but Sonnet seems like it's capable of processing it. Okay, fantastic. I wonder if the Gemini one works or not. What do you see in this image? A striking and beautifully captured close-up portrait of a woman. Wow, that's definitely not what's in that picture. Let's see if we can get it working the same for all of the AI providers. I'm going to stop it right there. And actually, I'm curious, if I go back to these, there's no way I can click on it right now, and that's a problem. I want to be able to do that. Let me take a quick detour and make sure that the images appear nicely. When we currently have an image as part of a message, it has a sort of image info box instead of showing the actual image. Can we please replace that with the image itself so that it's clear to see what was submitted with the message? All right, and then I'm going to say here, okay, so it looks like we actually have the file processing working for the Anthropic models, but it is still not working for OpenAI and Gemini. Can you please investigate their documentation to make sure that we are properly integrating with these services? Okay, now it's showing this no preview available. Okay, so right now I just see this for the images. Actually, I'm going to take a screenshot of that. Can you investigate the way that we are storing and retrieving images and add logs if necessary to figure out why we can't render them here? Okay. OpenAI and Google obviously have a completely different interface for processing these images. This is, again, one of the values of a tool like T3 Chat. It helps abstract all of that complexity so that you can use these models and have a seamless experience. So this is the necessary difficulty of an app like this. Okay, looks like it's creating some endpoints to... Okay, let me stop it right there because I see it's talking to the server just in the middle of the text here, in the middle of this file. I'll say, please use server.com and API. Okay, let me restart the server real quick because something got jammed. Okay. What do you see in this image? Oh, hey, take a look at that. It actually uploads. Yes. Amazing. Okay, everything basically worked here. We got the image and we got GPT-4o to actually display it properly. Great. There was some lagging and weirdness with how the image was showing up, but we can fix that. Actually, let me continue this chat, and I'm going to put this image back in here, and then we're going to ask Gemini. What do you see in this image? Yes. 3-dimensional golden dollar sign. Perfect. Okay, great. So we got the image processing for all 3 providers working. Now I think we should clean up some of the user experience. I wonder if I refresh this, can we still see those images? Let's see. If I go here, yes. Okay, the images load. It's super chonky for some reason, but the images load. And yeah, we got these images are private. So we're talking through the server and we're passing the token to be able to see them just for our account. They're not publicly exposed. And we're able to send them to all of the various providers. So we got that whole feature working. Now, this app is not yet complete. I'm going to do a little bit more work on it, but I think we've gotten it to a very good point, especially for this video. I'm going to keep working on it before I submit it to Theo's challenge, but I'm pretty happy with this. And just to recap, right, what you've seen is really kind of a new way of developing software. I did very little actual coding, actually modifying lines of code, yet here we have a fully functional application that has tens of thousands of lines of code at this point, and it works, right? It's a different approach. You're using AI to code, but you're not doing it blindly. you're doing it very thoughtfully. You are asking AI to write a bunch of documentation, and then you are verifying that, you're making changes to that, you create a plan, and then you have AI agents separately work on different parts of the plan. Then you test the app, you see how it's going, you come up with a list of things that you want to be changed, and you ask the AI to make those changes. As errors come up, you paste them back in, and you keep iterating. Now, it really helps to know fundamental programming concepts to be able to do this in the first place, like how I knew that we needed an R2 bucket to store these files. So you should definitely still try to learn how full stack applications work, and you can do that by checking out this other video. Thanks for watching. I really had fun coding this with you, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.